We're going to have a go at using this particular picture here, and I'm going to stretch it that way and change it totally. I don't have the copyrights to use that picture to copy it straight off, so we're just going to base our paintings upon this. To show Hemma, who's asked me across to her home, we're going to demonstrate a few ways of painting water and waves, and that one is going to be, this one's going to be a watercolour. And we're going to concentrate on this deep blue sky. We're going to have here the different blues going across, and how to paint this wave, enlarge this wave here onto the beach. So we'll be using some wet into wet techniques, wet next to wet techniques, playing one colour against another, and then finally the wet next to the dry to get sharp edges. I'm not going to bother drawing it out, I'm just going to go straight for it, just to have fun. A very basic set of watercolours which will do us today, and we'll see what we can do. So we've got a horizon line along here. We want that wave to be a little bit higher, so I'm going to have the horizon line just below halfway. It's unwise to have things always straight on halfways exactly, because they look a bit too obvious. The thirds rule is quite good, to have 2/3 or 1/3, like the golden rule, the golden mean. So I'm going to actually start with the sky and work my way downwards. We want to leave nice white fluffy clouds here, and to do that I'm going to paint in the very deep blue first of all. I'm going to make myself some very, very deep blue into the ultramarine, and paint it very, very strongly at first. Drop some darker into it in a moment. Keep it nice and loose. So we'll come in with that paint. Watercolour always goes so it's slightly lighter than when we paint it on. So I'm going to leave a little bit of a vignette at the top. I'm not going to paint right the way to the top. We'll just keep it fairly loose for the moment. Coming down into the clouds here, a little bit of very dark blue now, a little bit of, I think it's Prussian. The colours I'm using are not mine, so they didn't actually, being cheaper watercolours, they didn't actually have the colours marked on them. I'm having to guess as to what these are for this demonstration, but quite fun nonetheless. So we've got this very deep blue coming down from the top there, and then we'll start to work that around the cloud effects that we want, coming right down into here. Taking that blue again, coming down with it. Starting to leave some cloud effects already. Today here. Can't find any cerulean blue in watercolour, so I'm going to have to use some acrylic for this. Which is not ideal because it'll be opaque, but we'll try and manage. So I'm going to bring this cerulean blue now into the edges of this cloud. We do need these different colours, and you should always use artist watercolour quality in your paintings. Try not to get away with using the cheaper ones if you can help it. Right, and a great big fluffy cloud coming down there, around here into there, and this is where I'm going to start using clean water to get my softer edges. So if I now come and I want a softer edge here, and just let that water do the work for me, let the clouds come on down into here, look, by letting them mix with that water, so it's hard edged in some places and softer edge in others. And we'll let that dry off a bit before I put some more hard edges back in again. And little white clouds coming down here through, right the way down to the horizon line there. And yet again at that horizon line, I want to get a fairly sharp edge in a minute, but I'm going to have to come in with my, I'm still using the acrylic at the moment, I'm going to have to come back in with my acrylic paint and put a line across there. Let the watercolour, this is controlled action, look at that beautiful effect we have there of the paint running one into another, the wet into the wet. And as this is starting to dry, I can now drop in more colour, make it a little bit stronger around some of these smaller clouds. A little bit of the darker blue here and there, just to pick out the underneath of these clouds and the effects we've got. So the dark comes in around. We let the water do the work, the accident do the work underneath this cloud coming up here. Underneath that cloud, and there's a little bit of pink coming into there, so I'll take a tad of the, looks like cobalt violet here, and just bring that into there, underneath that. Because we've got reflected light from the warmth underneath, so a little bit of warmth into the clouds there to give this almost Caribbean blue look. We've really got to go for these strong colours. Soften that down at the edges. Carry on down here into this blue, still working at the moment. The wet into the wet. All the way down to the wave, which is going to start about here. And you notice I'm just starting to do a little bit of dry brushwork, just dragging the brush across there to start to get the feeling of the wave. Now this wave, and I want to drop some more darker blues into here in a minute, while this is still wet, I need to just flick in the idea of some ripples and shoals underneath the water here, and those will spread out. So a little darker at the edge there. And these will spread out, and the wetter the paint is, the more that they will spread. So this is timing. We have to understand watercolour and practice with it to know how wet the paint can be, how much we are allowed to play with. That must be darker down there. To play with letting this colour in before it just completely coats in. So we have to let this dry off a bit now before I want stronger colours. Carrying on down into here, I want to come to a very light colour, and we paint our light colours a light green. We paint our light colours first in watercolour always. Take a little bit of lemon yellow, the tiniest touch of white in a minute, and we'll paint the lower edge of the wave as it curls over. So here's the lower edge of the wave going in. And a little bit more on the curl of the wave there. Let that dry just a little bit. We don't want everything spreading into that yet. Now we've got another colour coming down there, which will be the turquoise again. So we'll paint that next to it, and you'll notice that the paint is softly blending one into another, because we're painting wet next to wet now, so that one colour comes slightly into another. And to get the feeling of that wave, I'm going to drag these colours through in just a moment. Now we come to a slightly stronger cerulean. And I've got to start leaving the white for the foam as it comes over as well. I'm going to show two ways of doing this. We could have used masking fluid. I'm leaving the white now directly. Equally, I could be putting in some white paint afterwards, and I'm going to show a little bit of that, or even a touch of pastel. So there are several ways of doing this. I've got the dark coming over there, and you see now I'm just starting to drag over these colours to give the feeling of the wave one into another. So that's coming over into that wave with little brush strokes which will spread out gently to give the feeling of this wave curling over at that bottom edge there. But I want a sharp edge here, so I'm deliberately letting that dry whilst I come up into here with those stronger blues. So back up into here now, and let's drop in the stronger blue all the way along here as it curls, that wave curls over there. Still painting a fairly soft edge because I'm painting wet next to wet, so that this wave is curling in. So we carry on with this dark colour, dropping a bit more of the darker in now on top of the wave, a little bit over the top edge of it, like that. Little touches as the wave curls. We've got these lighter areas, curls over, comes a little bit darker underneath. And we're starting to get the feel of the edge of that wave now, which I'm going to make a little bit harder in just a moment again. Comes right in down there. And we'll just keep curling that wave over the top. And you can now start to see this wave beginning to appear, which is rather fun. Is this dry enough yet? No, almost. I've got to wait till that's dry to put this darker blue line along in a minute. I've got to be very careful. And watercolour is just so much to do with timing. These little bits of water just coming in, these lines coming in here as I go down. Right, that wave, believe it or not, is the basic of it is almost done now. A little bit more green into there, I'll take a little touch of the green and drop in some deeper green under here. And it's a little bit warmer on top, so you've got to really look for colour, always really look for your colours. Just take a wee touch of whatever that is there. It looks like alizarin, but it's not working. There we go, that's it. And that alizarin is going to come along the bottom edge. Just a moment, but it's also coming along the top edge of the wave slightly here. and down into here. A little bit warmer as the wave comes over, so I'm putting a little bit of purple into my deep blue here. And then I'm going to deliberately bring along under the edge of the wave, while it's still softer, that warm colour. A little bit of brown now. Really looking for these colours. A little bit of brown coming along the bottom of that wave. Breaking up underneath as it comes over there. And again back into the top of the wave. It's just starting to dry off a bit. So I'm now feeling the top edge of this wave. A bit more of my blue. And the paint is gradually drying, and as the paint is drying I've got more control of the paint as it comes into the folding of this wave. Right, we've got that bit. Now I've got to leave, I've got to put the sand in next, and I've got to leave white areas for the sand as well. So, and I also want to be a little bit stronger underneath here, underneath these clouds. I'm going back to my cerulean blue again and just paint in and around the clouds a little more here. Now it's a bit drier, I can afford to be a fraction stronger under there. Some of the clouds, make them show out a bit, because we really do want this strong Caribbean feel around those clouds. There we go, let's give them the really bright clouds. And I'm going to just use a little bit of dry brush. The water now is getting a bit mucky, so that's nice. I can just soften some of these cloud edges just a bit. Just drag a little bit of dry brush over the surface just to link in those clouds of fraction. There we go. Now let's look at the beach here. We've got to let that dry off now before I can do anything else, so we'll look at the beach. We've got a purpley colour going on here with white left behind, so I've got to come in darker and deliberately, unless I go in with the white paint afterwards, I've got to start leaving bits of white and foam in zigzags and a white edge going all the way along here where the water finishes, right up, and I'm going to go just into the edge here. I'm going to let it just, that's almost dry, that paint look, and I can just gently blend it a fraction. That comes all the way through to here. That's going to be a lot warmer there, leaving these little bits of white just snaking through these foam bits. Wow, quite a strong, deep purpley blue. Take a little bit of red in my Prussian, and colours pretty weak. That's better. And we're coming quite strong under here, underneath this wave. Slightly broken effect. It's not a complete line. As the wave breaks, it's slightly broken. And whilst this is still wet again, I can come back into here. It's just wet enough to still spread in and get underneath this bit of wave here. I want these effects and just feel that wave breaking over. So you can see the wave appearing now, and that's, this darker colour is coming out into the sand. Now we need to go to warmer and take some of that cobalt violet from earlier and just bring that into play here, which makes these cools seem cooler. So we don't just put one colour on stronger and stronger, we put the opposites into the painting. Got our white areas now. I start to need some more yellow ochre colour, which I seem to have here, so let's see if we can get that working. bit more yellow going on into the water there. A bit messy, but it'll be alright. And down here, again I'm going to bring my cooler lemon yellow to play first of all, right the way along there for the sand. Let it come into the water here and into the waves, because it's going to be reflecting to the bottom of that wave. Curling over with the bits of white, and then the more orange pink. See if we can get that colour going. I'll be very thin with my paint now. There we go. So we've got our wave forming now. Is this dry enough yet? Quite humid today, so just dry enough I think to have a go at that. So whilst this dries off now, I'm going to go back up to the horizon line, and I'm going to go from my oval mop to a round, number 8 isn't it? Can't see. Yes, exactly, that's spot on, number 8. And I've got to try and paint along here a fairly straight line. And I want to be fairly strong with my cerulean again, so as I haven't got that I'm going to have to use yet again my acrylic from before. Not ideal, but it's working. Let's see, there we go. And I need to be able to paint a fairly straight line, get a fairly straight line along here. So not far out, we'll do that once again. Try and get a line all the way along. Okay, thanks, I've got it now. There we go. And again. Right, that's quite nice. And then I'm going to blend that acrylic colour, cerulean blue, down and into here. And I want to make the brush a little bit drier, so I'm going to just drag it across the surface like this, to get the sparkling effect of the water, to let this knot paper, which I think it is, just sparkle through a bit. But it's fun, you can see the idea, can't you, Emma? Yep, you'll have a go at this later yourself, yes. And dragging that quickly and just lively across the top of the paper here. Don't get too bogged down with trying to be too perfect with it. Use the effect, the accidental effects. Don't try and copy the photographs too much, in other words. Now we'll bring that blue across a bit more into the wave now, especially into here. As it curls over, we've got that colour shining through. We're starting to feel more the texturing of the wave as it comes over there, so I'm putting little curly marks in here. And once that's dry, I've got to put a much darker colour over that as well. But whilst I'm waiting for that to dry, I'll just prepare it, because we need some. Now it's getting a bit drier, we can start to just drop in some of these slightly stronger into the wet bits, stronger blues, a little bit more here to reflect from the sky. We're gradually building this watercolour up. There we go. Feel that wave coming across and down and over. Right, now at this stage we have to let things dry off, because we now, from now on, really want to be painting much harder edged details in to make this look wet. So we'd let that dry off a bit. But I'm going to just put a little bit more sand in here. It's a little bit of what I hope is burnt sienna. Just slightly warm, a little bit of that burnt sienna, and a tad of, we'll just drop in some soft edges there and put a bit more detail in a moment with the harder edges, just to get the feeling of the warmth on the edge of the sand there and down to here as well. Right, that has to dry, so we'll just take a 2-minute break. Our painting is just dry enough. There's still some slightly wet areas, but now is the time to come back with my ruler. Okay. So first of all I have to paint an ultramarine across here, and then I'm going to put a bit of the Prussian into that. So I'll mix up my strong ultramarine, nice band of it to go all the way across, and we'll try and paint a fairly thin line across here. Don't want too heavy a line, all the way across again, all the way across here. I don't want a sparkle this time, so I do want a nice solid line of ultramarine right the way across. There we are. That's nice, thank you. Now I'm going to just drag that ultramarine across here at the edges to let it ripple into the sea next to it and get this effect of slightly sparkly sea. So I'm just dragging it over the surface like that, look, just to break up that edge a fraction. Now I want to go back with my stronger blue. This is my Prussian again, a much darker blue. Just along the top edge of it, and drop this in, and we'll make this top edge, that's better, darker. All the way along the top edge, and that, because we're painting wet into the wet, that will drop downwards and just blend in gradually. Went a little bit higher there, and that gives us that lovely deep blue. Now down here we're back to now, because the paint is drier, we can start to paint in more detail here, and we're working paint over dry, so wet over dry, which gives me the chance to now actually start to paint some textures in and really get a bit more detail in here, in and around the top of this wave, and make it start to look like a wave. Same there. And this picks it up in the foreground. And around these pieces of foam as it comes down, again now we can really start to play these stronger, sharper edged colours around the foam. And when that curls over there, I want it very, very dark there. I'm going to use quite heavy paint now, quite thick paint down here, to really start to feel this broken edge of the surf as it just, that wave just breaks over there beautifully. And in and around and down, we feel the wave coming over these little curves, the top of it here. And certainly much, much darker under this bit as it comes over there. Right up deep into there. And there's our wave coming across. Now under here, below that foam, we've got a few bits of dark to put in here as well, because it's quite textural all the way along here. Little squiggles and circles and dots and dashes. But down here is a much sharper edge again, so I've got to come in and we'll feel more of that. But it's much warmer. And amongst these little bits of sand that we had earlier, I need to start making it a little more detailed. And we get little bits of dots and dashes, and where that edge of that water comes in. Same here. We've got slightly sharper edges on the edge of that wave, and this starts to make it look more glassy, because we've got rough against smooth, light against dark, rough against smooth, warm against cool. And this lovely soft wave just gently breaking over in this Caribbean light. Now down here I want to do a little bit of glazing and just start to leave and feel the wet sand there. So this is a glaze or a wash over a colour. And that painting is as near as damn it for me. I'm not going to do a lot more on this because it's working quite well. Oops, Emma's just going to do a tipsy and I'm going to film it and get £200 from You've Been Framed. Break that down into there because it's a more broken effect of surf. There we go. Now what I'm going to do now is just take a little bit of pastel for the fun of it. I'm just going back and I'm just going to use a little bit of pastel here just to break in one or two bits of white just to show you what can be done. I'm using that pastel to twist the marks down there. You can go along this edge of this water here. You could use white gouache, equally the same, but just to bring some of the whites back that I lost earlier to show you that you don't have to be perfect with your preliminary work, and how these waves, the whites, can now be brought back a little bit here as that comes down and over there. We'll just glisten across the top of the water a fraction there. Don't need to do much of this, it's just really to show you the technique of what can be done and how that wave can come down and through into there. And the whites here too, coming forward. And there we are. I think that'll do for that little demonstration. Works fairly well. But I will just put a signature on that. Just a little bit of tidying up here and there now. I think we can afford to go behind the wave just slightly more in places like that to bring out a few of the ripples behind there. Don't want to make too much because it'll spoil the... I shall soften those back in a moment just a little bit. But we already had our soft effects when we painted wet into wet earlier. So what I'm doing now is putting some slightly harder edges back in to work against the foil of the smoother wave as it breaks over. We'll just drag that across the top a bit as well. And there we are. I think that's quite a nice little piece, and it'll do for the demonstration of what I wanted to do. So Caribbean beach and a nice gentle wave lapping in here. It's a little bit more work, not a lot, to do down here, just to bring that wave out. There we go. A little bit more of the blues, but not too much. Greens underneath the wave as it breaks. There we are. Now we'll go back to our other painting. So I built up a very rapid painting here using lights and darks, and I'm going to use my fingers now just to dapple into the spray. We could use a sponge effect, but I'm just using my fingers to get this feeling of the spray coming up before I go back in with the other colours. I've left the white areas showing. I've dropped wet into wet, hard edged against those dry bits of paper, and I'm now dropping in some Prussian blue and a little bit of red to really get some very deep purples going on down and through the waves here. Feel these edges. Right, having got that bit, which I'm going to soften in a moment, I want some little lines of amongst the surf here. These snaking edges going on as this wave curls and thunders over. So we've dropped in the paint, we've dropped in more darker paint in behind it. Now I need to come up here and we need to have a thin wash of ultramarine blue right the way up into here. And I'm going to vary that wash with water so that it's thicker and thinner as it comes up and over at the top here, and we get the effect of this nighttime, almost late evening wave thundering in. A little bit of green coming up from the wave into there. We can lift out anytime we want with the brush as well, so right the way through into there. Now I've got to start dropping in the stronger colour again. Now we'll just have a feeling of the darker wave behind here, the second wave coming in through there. And to get more detail in the foam here, to do that I'm going to have to let this dry off quite a bit more and then go back into it in just a moment. We've got the feeling of other waves even behind that, and very, very dark back up here. It will dry lighter anyway. So again I'm going to put in a wash and drop colour actually into this wet into wet paint, letting that spray up through now a bit using the texture of the brush. And it's timing again, I've got to let this dry off a bit. Now these white areas here, I'm going to take a bit of cobalt violet and hopefully it's just about dry enough, and start to give that a quick wash into some of the white areas, which will leave this area standing out. That comes up and over, just dry brushwork again across there. And we get the feeling of this tumbling wave coming across. Just soften some of those colours in. And again we need to let this dry off so that I can come back in a moment and make some of these edges a bit stronger, sharper, and get more texture in against the foam and the waves. Now we're going to continue with this watercolour we were doing of the much rougher water, and I can start to use glazes of one colour over another a bit more and soften them back. So let's have this background sea here, this other second wave that's coming up behind here, slightly broken. And having got that in, drop a bit more dark into it in places. I can bring that down and through, just using the brush sideways on like that, and then take a little bit of sponge, and take some of that same colour and start the spray going on up into the back. So we'll sponge this spray up through. it's coming right down into here. So working from a photograph, and we're using the photograph, we're not copying it, we're simply using it. To keep because it's not being stretched, this piece of paper. Because I'm not working in the studio here, we're working at Emma's house just to demonstrate for her. Spray coming up through some of the texture. Right, so I've been doing sponging work around here to get the foam effect as this comes up. Now I want to do a lot more of that and really drop back in this strong deep blue, a mixture of ultramarine and Prussian. So we get a much darker sky up here, but it's still very textural. So I really want to get up here and drop in this much darker sky up into the here, and then I'm going to blend it together so that it's not textured at all, it goes just plain. The texture is coming down into where the foam is coming up off the sea, right like that. You can just see the sea going on behind, so I'm going to drop in that just a little bit more again, just to darken those top edges again, as if it's just coming in behind there. Again, blend it downwards, use my clean water to let it drop down into the sea below. We'll just indicate that it's going on behind a fraction. Now, with my big brush, back up here again, above, and drop in that dark so that it now comes down into the foam. I can use my sponge to literally pick that up and bring it down into the foam here below. So we're using it both ways round. Having got that effect, which is rather nice, I'm going to come back to my waves here and start to darken in very deep purples and things now, come back into the waves here and really start to find the texturing of the water amongst this tumbling wave. Harder edges here, bits of dark amongst it. And this is the thing with painting waves. One of the problems is, like a waterfall, if you photograph something like this, it just looks like plastic foam. And that is one of the problems. We have to get quite gestural marks onto this to actually make it work. And if it's too harsh, we come back with the water again and soften it. And we're building up from our lights to our darks. Now, last time I used a little bit of pastel to make the spray. This time I've used sponge technique, but I also want to show you what can happen with a little bit of gouache as well. Really come in with some of the darks now, so we get the effect of this really dark, brooding sea. And we don't need to do a lot more with this. We've got the effects we wanted. I'm just going to soften this foam at the foreground here by just going over it a little bit with the brush sideways to give a bit more texture just here and there, because most of the light wants to be in that middle piece here. You can see how we can use the brush, texturing it to get a bit more foam effect. And there we are again, another little demo showing how we can get that huge wave coming across. There. Now finally, just to show you what I meant about the gouache, I'm going to turn off the camera just for a moment to prepare for the next painting, and we'll just put a little bit of white gouache with the sponge to get the foamy effect at the end. And I do want a little bit more warmth here, so I'm going to take some of that cobalt violet again. Just come in with a little bit of warmth into the edges of this. Okay, the painting still isn't dry, but I'm going to take a sponge and a little bit of white gouache paint onto that sponge, as you can see here, and we'll just show you how you can then come back onto this and we can make a little bit of the lighter foam come up and through, a little bit texture back if you want to. This could have been done with masking fluid in the same way, although you messed your sponge up rather doing it that way. But it just shows that we can get that little bit more foam and texture coming up and through, and how, right through here maybe. And there we are. That was just to show you another way of working. Same here. I've hit some of the lighter colours and the foam around the edges here, which gives you the effects. And that's it. There you go. A little demonstration on doing a rougher wave. So now we've got our nice calm Caribbean and our stormy sea. Right. What we're going to do now is this one. So we're going to have this wave breaking across. I'm using some white mount card, and the first thing to do is to cover that mount card with a background colour as quickly as possible, because we're using the white card and I want to build up this time my lights over my darks. So what I'm going to do straight away is mix up colour fairly thickly in acrylic colours, and is get this colour on all over the card in a couple of coats, because it's going to take several coats to build this up to be dark enough. Again, I'm not drawing anything out, just straight in with the colour, and I just want to get the card a nice coat of paint so that I can work my lighter colours over the top. The problem is getting it even enough. Let's see, that's about a third of the way up, so that paint comes up to about there. Having to approximate just to get the pen going a moment. So I'm using a little bit of water and almost plonking the colour straight on. That wave comes right up and it curls over there and comes right up and round here. So very expressive. We're talking about the fact that if we paint waves and water as a photograph, it will look like plastic foam. So what we've got to start doing now is being a little bit more expressive, and we're going to use more texture and more brush strokes to finalise this, starting with a fairly smooth surface. I do need a nice smooth surface to start with here, because I want my rough against smooth. I keep saying this, but in our armoury we have warm against cool, rough against smooth, light against dark. And in this case we're going to have the rough against the smooth as I link these colours together. The board soaks it in very quickly, so I've got to work quite fast to get a nice even coat. And I'm going to bring one colour over another. A slightly broken colour effect, but just to get this explosive quality. And I'm using some flat nylon brushes for this, heavier brushes than I was using before. That's it. Now I want to come down to my deeper blues. Again, it's just a demonstration. Here I've got to bring deeper blues over this. Come on to the cobalt, I suspect, right through there. Let's get as straight a line as I can in the circumstances, because I'm having to paint at a slight angle because of the camera. I'm using a bit of water with it as well, just to get the board covered and to get the feeling of the luminosity of looking through the wave. Just get it covered for the moment. And in a moment we're going to also do another painting on mount card, but we're going to actually use the colour of the mount card to foil as a dark background and paint over it as a ground. It's very thin, this paint, so I'm having to give a couple of coats. Now a deeper blue, coming into some more Prussian. As the wave curls over here, I've got to put the much lighter colours on in a minute. Let's feel this tumbling huge bit of surf coming across. So my brush strokes are very much more about that now. Right down to the bottom corner, letting some of this lighter blue show through. Now we'll work some of this Keep a blue up into here as well. Okay, it's dry enough now to continue. I'm still working up my deeper colours. So I want some very, very deep blues to blacks going on through into here now. Leaving some of the texture showing through as it comes up and over. Using a little bit of dry brush there. To get the feeling of this. But I can work my lights over my darks, which is the beauty of this way of working. So in a moment I'm going to come back into here, working up the lights over the darks. Base paint, the base colours, the depth of the water. Now we start to work up again the lighter colours yet again. And I want this very, very light turquoise coming in now. So I'm going to use some very light cerulean come into here and curl over with that wave there, and even a little bit of green into it, letting it come through. Not quite the colour I wanted, but it'll have to do. I really would have liked slightly more turquoise there, but not to worry. And we'll use the brush on its edge to stipple in these edges of this foam and the edges of these waves as they curl across, working our darks and our mid-tones up first. That wave curls in, lifts up, because we can paint one top of another. Again, this is the beauty of this. And now we're getting the feeling of this wave falling over here, using slightly cooler blues again, dragging them down through that light. I do want that cooler blue into here as well. Just dappling the brush in, and we've got our basics. Now I want to go a lot lighter in the background on the sky, so I'm just going to mix up a bit more, slightly more pinky, very light blue, and just come in there and underneath this wave. Bit more broken colour there. As it comes up. And this way of painting requires that you put loads and loads of coats on. Because the paint is very thin, we have to keep working up this paint in layers across. And then we'll come back in again with that turquoise, which is coming up and through here as well. And that lovely deep blue that's happening around there. Oh, got white in it now. And I'm almost ready to start on my lights. Bring that right up and through. Slightly darker here. So we can use this paint like oil paint, beautifully thickly, look. Now let's go for these lovely big bits of light colour here, because we're just about ready there. Going to make a very light turquoisey yellow green. Just put a bit more of that light colour into the wave to give it more translucency as it comes over here. There we go. A little bit darker as it comes round. Now, depending if our paint dries quickly enough, we'll take some pink next. So I'm going to mix some rose with white. And bring that up and across, down this wave, all the way around that corner. cascading in across the tips of these. And then take my sponge, which I've now lost, and soften that back. So I use it for the watercolour with the gouache. Now I'm using it in this way to get this very soft, fine foam edge coming down there. That's giving it the softness. Again, come back to it, and we'll get underneath the wave here. And next, we just feel along these edges of these ripples coming, these parasols of the... Now, make some cream, a little touch of yellow and white. Always make your white first and add the yellow to it. Don't go putting the yellow and then adding the white. It'll have a right mess. Look how we can now really get the sunlight coming around this wave as it cascades down. So you wanted different types of wave. We've had the very smooth waves, then we've gone to a rough, stormy, almost nighttime, so dark that the light's been lost. And now, using my little flat brush, we've come around to using acrylics to do a dark ground and paint light over the top. With the watercolour it was light and then going to dark. With this paint it's dark and then going to light. I haven't got to do a lot more, it was just to show you the effect. A huge wave cascading over. And you can play backwards and forwards now between your lights and your darks. So I can come back into this and I can play my darks back into that if I want to now and bring out these colours more. Just where it curls over there, for instance. And into here where that wave comes round. And that will do for that one, just to show you. And finally, in 5 minutes flat, I'm just going to show you how we can use water and pastel to get the effects of making waves using pastel. Now we're going to just do a very quick study of using the grey card, and I'm going to just whip on some colour, show you how we can use the grey of the card as part of the painting. We're going to use this little painting here, this little photograph here, and I'm just going to use that card using the paint fairly transparently in literally seconds, as if I'm doing a study actually there at the beach. Great fun to do, it's a lovely way to work, and the beauty of this is that the mount card is acid free, so it should be fairly permanent. So I'm going to just whip on these colours onto the card using the mid-grey of the card to form my background to the painting, and as if I'm just actually painting out there, letting that grey show through. And look how quickly we can make something. These different blues here before I go on to the pastel. Very, very fast study, as if I was actually painting out there. This is how I would work to catch these very rapid studies, and the movements and the marks are about the thing I'm painting. So very, very quick wash over, because we're very short on time. I've just got time to show you this. Blend that out into the card. Come back, take some white and mix up a very light blue, cool blue with a little bit of pink, added my background here. Some blue into that. So I've got the foaming froth in the background. Same colour, just to give the shadow of the falling wave coming across here. A bit more pink. All the way down around here, the same. Literally done in seconds, because that's all we've got. When we're out there, we haven't got time to mess about. We've got to get things done instantly. Now a bit of the cream that we mixed earlier to catch the tips of these waves. So a very, very quick study indeed. Now we start putting in some texture here. And as you can see, you could build it up as much as you want. But there we are, that will do. A little bit more yellow, a bit more greeny yellow behind here, because it's sunk a bit into the card. I want a bit more translucency under that wave, just to catch the sunlight going through it. And that's our quick study on card. Now finally, a quick bit of pastel and water. I wasn't doing a much more complicated one, but we haven't really got time, so I'm just going to go for this one here, just to show you how you can use pastel and water. Some rather nice pastels. They're not what I would usually use, so what I'm going to do, time to even stretch the paper, I'm going to wet the paper straight off, and I'm going to use these pan pastels, which are actually in pans, so they're quite fun in that way. Not Peter Pan pastels, but pan pastel as in pan sets. And I'm going to make my colours by literally lifting those pastels up off there and painting them straight in like a watercolour, and if we get time I'll be able to run a bit of ordinary pastel over the top. So we can use them just like watercolours, and I can mix them together on the paper. Now, I could have put them onto the dry paper and then gone for it afterwards, but I'm not going to. I'm putting it onto the wet paper to paint wet into wet, and then I'm going to work on top as it dries out, I hope, depending on our time. I would have liked to have used my unisons to show you this, but you have seen me using the unisons doing other work, so you do know how it can work. But I've got to get these on thickly enough, and it just depends on drying time now. So I'm going to work up my darks, leaving a little bit of the light showing, trying to get a creamy effect. Remember that with working with pastel into water, we can use our fingers as well and actually mould things like this, which is rather fun. So I'll leave some light colours. I don't want too light because I want to be able to put the light pastels over the top. But I am trying to get this lovely turquoise, deep blue green that's in the waves. And then I'll get this feeling of this surging, pounding tide and waves that are curling in here. It's a very expressive way of working. So I could be painting with acrylics doing it this way, but if I get a chance we're going to see how we can actually put the lighter colours over the top of this. Look at the lovely expressive brush marks we can get doing it this way. Pan pastels are pans of colour that are fixed together almost like a paint. The only disadvantage is you can't pick them up and use them directly, but we can use tools to put them on, such as a special sponge on a stick, and make the pastel thicker as it starts to dry out. Get darker and darker. I'll be able to put some darks in at the end, I hope. So we let that dry off now for a couple of minutes, and then we go onto this with the lighter colour. So I'm going to take a bit of sponge and start to put in these lights. You can see how quickly, again, with fun, we can just take a lighter colour and work up into the background here. These wonderful effects of various greys, and to get this effect of the this sponge with the pastels, blending them onto the surface here. And if we wanted to be much stronger, we could use paints on this as well. At the moment I'm just doing the soft effects with these colours, the waves. Lovely green colour that's coming in there to get this very soft effect. First I'm going to come back to my harder pastels and just see if I can work in more detail with these over the tops of the waves and along here. Really haven't got much time to do this in. It's as if I'm doing it as a real study out there, as I was saying earlier. But not to get caught in this sea if you're swimming. Look at the amount of colours in there, really try and find those colours. And then all we need to do is bring back a little bit of the darks and just see if we can get some of those darks back again a little bit. But you get the idea, I'm sure, by now. This is just to give you an idea. Just quickly, not to finish a painting and just to do a quick how these things could be used to get the effects you want of that rough sea. Yep, that will have to do. We've got to go.